You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1percentpodcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1percentpodcast.com. What's going on, everybody? This is episode 49 of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Truett Taylor. Super excited to be with you guys today. We've got an excellent guest lined up. Miss Molly is going to be on the show today. You guys are going to love her story. She's a 20-year cancer survivor. But before we get into Molly's interview, let's go over today's 1% moment of truth. Today's 1% moment of truth is going to be about something that I think about pretty often, and I'm sure that everyone listening to the show today needs to be constantly reminded of. So today's 1% moment of truth is going to be about being yourself. There's 2 main reasons that people are unhappy every day with their job, with their life. Number 1 is they're buying too much stuff. And number 2, they're trying to please somebody else. So if you were like me, for several years, I got stuck in a rut of being in a job that I absolutely hated after a while, even though I was doing well, but I constantly had to keep making more money to keep up with the lifestyle that I had. Well, I decided to finally just leave that and go be myself and do what I wanted to do. And I started my own business. And even though it's been really tough in the very beginning stages of having a design business, I am so much happier now because, number 1, when you don't have as much money, you can't go out and buy stuff that you don't really need. But number 2, I'm not trying to please anybody. I'm not trying to live to work. I'm not trying to do anything but be myself every day. And I can't tell you how happy I am and how many doors have been opened up even to do this podcast, something that I'm super passionate about. I could never do this if I was working at the same job that I had before. So again, my reminder for everyone today is stop trying to impress someone else. Stop buying stuff that you don't need. But most importantly, be yourself. Follow your hobbies, follow your passion, and do exactly what All right, that's today's 1% moment of truth. Let's get into a little bit of the background from my guest, Miss Molly, today. Molly is a 20-year colon cancer survivor. She was diagnosed at 23 years old with stage 2 colon cancer. And that was 20 years ago, back when younger people weren't even on the radar as far as getting cancer, especially colon cancer. But Molly's had so many great experiences since then and has been able to touch the lives of thousands of people. She's the co-founder of the Colon Club. She skated across the U.S. just to raise awareness for colon cancer. And she's had a chance to meet so many different influential people and really started so many of the things that we see today in other organizations. So why don't you welcome Miss Molly to the show today. Molly's interview was one of my favorites. It was just a great conversation that she and I had together and really connected and bonded on a lot of things. I'm sure you're going to enjoy listening to her interview as much as I did actually talking to her. As always, I love to hear your feedback, so enjoy my interview with Miss Molly.
Welcome back to the 1% Podcast. I have Molly here with us today, all the way from upstate New York. Molly, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Perfect. I'm so excited to have you on the show. After reviewing your book, One Drop of Rain, it's just the stories that you've been able to tell, all the advocacy that you've done over the past several years. Was it been 14, 19? How many years now?
I was diagnosed just over 20 years ago now.
20 years ago. Yeah. All the work that you've done has been amazing. So I'm super excited to have you on the show and have all of our listeners really hear about your life and all the work that you've done and really be inspired by your story. So welcome everyone to the 1% podcast. Molly, why don't you start by telling everyone a little bit about who you are?
Well, as I just said a minute ago, I'm a 20-year survivor of stage 2 colon cancer. I'm a bit of an advocate because I really love to talk about colons now. I'm actually a personal trainer now as well, and owner of the Saratoga Ninja Lab. Ask me how I got involved in something like that. But
Nice.
and I'm actually the co-founder of the Colon Club, which is a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness of colon cancer in out-of-the-box ways, especially young people. I'm also a mom. I'm an ice hockey player, and now, like you said a second ago, I'm also an author, which has been kind of a dream come true.
So let's talk about this ninja club that you have going on. What is this, like American Ninja Warrior, or what do you guys do?
It is. I was at right place, right time to get involved with that, and as a personal trainer, it's kind of this new way to fitness, if you will. So yeah, I'm a partner in the lab, we call it, and it's all, like you said, American Ninja Warrior type obstacles. And it's humbling, to say the least, because I am very bad at it and I consider myself to be pretty strong. So, but it's a lot of fun. And, health and wellness is kind of in my wheelhouse. It's something, especially given my history, it's something that I'm really passionate about. So being involved in this has been pretty exciting.
I was always jealous of the guys on American Ninja Warrior because I'm a lot taller than most people. And I'm just like, that's just kind of out of my height range. I need to be about 10 inches shorter to do something like that. But
I don't know, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. You should give it a try.
Oh no, I feel like my feet would hit the ground every time. So, well, I'm excited to have your story be shared with everybody. And we're going to really dig into all the things that you've done. Why do you feel like it's important for you to be able to share your story in your book? And then, throughout all the past 20 years, what has really inspired you to continue to share your story?
20 years ago when I was first diagnosed, I was told, you're the only one in the country. You're probably even the only one in the world to be diagnosed this young. And I remember being so angry and, just hearing people say, oh, there's nobody else like you. And then meeting someone like me and finding it was one of the best things that could ever happen to me. I remember wanting to shout from the rooftops, this is something that can happen to anyone. Look at me. And being 23 years old, people would look and their jaws would drop just like I wanted. And it was a picture they weren't going to forget. So for me, it kind of helped me in my own journey to be able to raise awareness and show people this can happen to anyone, and, turn it around into something good, I guess, is a good way to put it. So I think it's important to share my story, and for that matter, now 20 years later, all these other people that are diagnosed young, have them share theirs as well. I think it's twofold. It's saving lives, but it's also, it was helpful to me to be able to get through my own journey. I think it's also kind of an important story to show to tell, because after 20 years, I can look back and go, wow, that was one heck of a crazy ride. And I can't believe how many people have been affected because of it now. And I'm just this normal kid. I mean, there's nothing special about me. I was just an angry kid who, like I said, I wanted to shout from the rooftops, and I did it enough that it kind of made these waves that other people grabbed onto and kept going with. So it's been, like I said, it's an awareness raising, but it's also to show one person can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've made a significant difference. Just to see, even in the past maybe 5 or 6 years, how the awareness for colon cancer screenings has dramatically increased, and people are starting to realize, and all the data is pointing to how people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are getting colon cancer at a higher rate than people in their 50s now. So it's crazy to see the statistics go in that direction. And, 20 years ago, you were, obviously an anomaly. And I think, when I got diagnosed at 31, people like, colon cancer is an old person's cancer is what I heard a lot. Right.
Right.
But apparently not if we were getting it at such a young age. So I want to dial back 20 years to when you were a 23-year-old.
Young and hip.
What was your life like prior to cancer? What kind of dreams and goals did you have, and what did you want to do?
So I was in college. I was going to school at Colorado State University. I was going to class. I was playing a lot of ice hockey. I would have considered myself very fit, and very active, especially in Colorado. Everybody's outside there. And I started having these dreams of playing for the U.S. Women's Olympic ice hockey team. So I had some obviously lofty goals, maybe even not necessarily playing for the women's team, but just getting that invitation for the tryout would have been the most amazing thing to me. And so I was very active.
So how do you get involved in women's ice hockey? In the South, we have no hockey, so I don't know anything about that.
Actually, so, I'm in upstate New York. We used to have the Adirondack Red Wings here, which was a very, very big deal. And when I moved to Colorado, I actually joined the ski team, because when you move to Colorado, that's what you do. You ski and you bike and you hike and you kayak. And those are all things that I was planning to do when I got there. And my ski team actually used to rent the ice once a week and go play shinny at 11 o'clock at night. We were a bunch of fools. We didn't wear pads. We didn't wear helmets. Somebody was going to the emergency room every week.
Right.
But I loved it. And one of the guys told me one night, he's like, you should really try out for the women's team here in town. And, you're pretty good. You should go do that. And I never looked back. And it was probably one of the best things I've ever done.
That's so awesome. So you're 23, you all of a sudden get diagnosed with, you get stage 2 colon cancer. Is that right?
Correct.
So stage 2 colon cancer. What were you thinking when you got that news?
I had been having symptoms in Colorado for months that I kept going to see a doctor. I had blood once in my stool. I had abdominal pain. I was losing weight. I had no appetite, you name it. And I had the symptom. And my doctor for 6 months, oh, you're constipated. Oh, you have irritable bowel syndrome. You have a spastic colon. That's one of my favorites. And never diagnosed me. I ended up going home to New York, where I was put into emergency surgery and diagnosed pretty quickly. And I remember him coming, my surgeon coming into my hospital room on my 23rd birthday. And he was a friend of the family. So he sat down on my bed and kind of put his hand on my knee. And he asked me if I understood what was happening. And I was kind of like, hey, doc, I got to get to Florida next week. I got a big trip to go visit my brother. And he told me I had colon cancer, and everything stopped. He kept talking, and I just, my mind went elsewhere. I was thinking of all the way that I was going to be treated, and how people were going to look at me as poor little sick Molly, and nobody was going to treat me the way that they always had. I didn't want that. And I started thinking about ways I could kill myself, because I didn't want to go through that. I didn't want to go through chemo. I didn't want to be weak. And it was devastating, probably one of the lowest points in my entire life. And I didn't think I'd ever come back from that.
Yeah.
And then while I was still in my hospital bed the same day, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who, I don't very often hear this person be very serious. And he called to say happy birthday. And I started crying on the phone, and he asked me what was wrong. And I didn't want to tell him, but at the same time, here I am crying on my birthday. So I did tell him. I said, I have colon cancer. And he said, oh man, that sucks. And at the time, I didn't laugh. I do now, but I was like, yeah, it really, really does. And he said, you know what though? You're Molly, you're strong. You're going to beat this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, that may not have sunken in immediately, but I think I really hung on to that and took that, and lived by it.
So as a hockey player, you're always associated with being tough. You don't participate in that sport if you're not tough. So here's this tough 23-year-old, physically, right? You're physically tough, you're in shape, and emotionally, I think unless because we test ourselves physically all the time, right? We push the boundaries, we get stronger, we have muscle memory, all those things. But when it comes down to emotional strength, until we have those battles and things we have to go through, we don't necessarily get any stronger with that. And did you find yourself being way more physically strong instead of emotionally and mentally strong when you first got diagnosed and had to work through that diagnosis?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked that before. And I think probably because it's easier to be physically strong and to put it out there than yeah, I would say definitely. But I think that the more people that I told, because initially I didn't want to tell anybody, I felt broken. And somehow dirty. That's not necessarily the right word to use, but, I felt that the more people I told about it, the better it felt. And then people would talk about colon cancer and learn about colon cancer because of me. And I feel like that made me feel mentally stronger because I was helping other people. at first on a smaller scale and then on a larger scale.
Yeah, I think so. Once you finish your treatment, and you were on the opposite side of the cancer diagnosis and the treatment and all the things that you were going through, when did you start becoming an advocate for cancer and colon cancer in general?
I was actually still doing my chemo when I asked my dad one day, hey, can I have some of your frequent flyer miles to go visit some friends out in Colorado? And he says, get a job. And I was like, well, fine, I'm just going to skate back. So it started as kind of a joke that, I'm going to inline skate back to Colorado because dad won't help me buy a plane ticket. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, wait a second, here I am, the anomaly, I'm the zebra in a room full of horses. I have this story that I can tell and maybe, show people, again, get my face out there and show, like, look at this girl, she had colon cancer. And then, what I was talking about before with how people are kind of, they learn about colon cancer, they start talking about it, and getting people to talk about it. That's the first step to getting them screened. So I kind of thought that stuff through, and I thought that's a great idea. I'm going to skate back to Colorado. I get to visit my friends. I'm going to put my face out there so people see that it can happen to anybody, and we'll raise some money at the same time. And it'll be a great thing. So that was kind of how it started. And that was back in the summer of 2000.
So you decided to skate from New York to Colorado?
Yeah. And it was awesome.
Tell us about that. Like because I talked to someone recently, a guy who had testicular cancer, and he decided to push a giant inflatable ball across the U.S.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And you raised a ton of awareness from that. Tell us about your journey. When you first decided to do that, I know it was probably sound like a great idea, but then the more you thought about it, you probably thought about all the risk that was involved. But what a great way to, incorporate a huge amount of awareness to document and to post photos of yourself. I know you sent me a photo a couple of weeks ago of you skating. I think you were in Iowa or at some point.
Yeah.
Tell us about that journey. Like when you started out on that, did it seem great until about halfway through and you decided that you're kind of too far to turn back, or how'd that whole journey go?
Funny you say that. I have a friend who actually wrote me a card, and she handed it to me the day I left, and she's like, don't open this until you have a really, really, really bad day. And, I kept that card in our RV, and I don't think I opened it until I don't know, Chicago or something. Like, it wasn't Chicago, but it was a long time before I opened it.
Mm-hmm.
It was, imagine the most fun thing that you can think of in your life. I love skating. I absolutely love skating. So here I am. I'd wake up every morning and I would skate, and my mom would follow me in the RV, and we were making a difference somehow. Like, how do you do that? It was awesome. We would roll into towns and news crews would meet us, and they would, tell the story, and they would talk about colonoscopies and why they're so important. And they would talk about colon cancer, and, here's a disease nobody wants to talk about. And we were putting it all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know that I had any real moments of I'm not going to make it, or, yeah, sure. There were days that were really hard. I had a lot of hills I had to skate up, but I'm skating in the sunshine. I'm not doing chemo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was an awesome, awesome summer. And, speaking of, how I got started, my town, I'm from this small town in upstate New York called Glens Falls, and the town just rallied behind me. It was awesome. They had me calling into the couple of local radio stations every morning, and I was writing a column for the newspaper back home, and people were really, really jumping into this and helping in amazing ways.
Yeah, that's so awesome. As you were going from place to place and you started gaining more awareness and starting, you said you had news crews meeting you at different places. When you set out, you had one mission. As you start seeing all these people that are affected by what you're doing, did your mission change, or did it get modified in any way as you felt the responsibility to make it from town to town as people were waiting for you?
I don't know if it changed so much as it became more than I realized,
mm-hmm.
because my mission has always been, and I feel like I remember somebody telling us along the way, there was a colorectal, I want to say she was a gastroenterologist or a colorectal surgeon. Her name was Ernestine Hambrick, and she had started an organization called Stop Colorectal Cancer, I believe in Chicago. And I remember her telling us early on, she decided to disband her organization, however you want to put it, because other organizations had stepped up and were doing it. And, I thought about that, and that's kind of why, further down the line with the Colon Club, we were so specific in our mission because we knew we were doing something that no one else could do and would do, for that matter. We were kind of doing the crazy things that people couldn't necessarily get away with because they had corporate sponsorships or because they had, and, I feel like the mission for me has always been raise awareness, make jaws drop, because that's a story they're not going to forget.
Mm-hmm.
But along the way, I was surprised to find, little things. I can remember hearing, I had some cousins that donated like their $1 weekly allowance because they thought it was so cool that their cousin was skating cross country. And later on down the line, during another one of the projects, I had a little girl tell me that this is something for later in the conversation, but a little girl tell me that she was upset with me because she wanted to be the first female professional ice hockey player. And it just like, it was affecting people in other ways, not just regarding colon cancer. It was also about making a difference and seeing that you can make change.
Mm-hmm. So once you finished, you got to your final destination, do you remember what your thought process was like once you finally arrived?
I had been kind of throwing the idea around to keep going, to actually skate through the Rockies, even though that looked like a horrible idea. I thought about continuing to go to the West Coast. But I was like, we planned for this. Let's just do this. But I knew I wasn't finished yet. I didn't know what was next. Actually, I did know what was next accidentally. I had been challenged to run the New York City Marathon it was actually for the New York Apple Association, to raise awareness of the cancer fighting qualities of apples. And I did plan on that, but I knew that like the bigger mission wasn't complete yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't know what that was yet.
Yeah. So I think would you be safe to say that it proved to you that you could do something great and it really inspired you to keep going and do more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny, I finished and people were like, what's next? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, hold on. Who said I had to do more? But
right.
I really did. It's just awesome to be able to, what you're doing, kind of same idea. You're saving people's lives, and you may never hear the stories, but you are. And that's kind of what was happening to me, is I would hear some of those stories and I would realize that I was making a difference, and it made me want to continue.
I think, and I try to coach different people on this, and you just brought up the point when you finish, people are like, okay, that's great. Now what's next? But being in love with the journey, because we're always on the journey. We have destinations that we stop at, right? But the journey is where we're on most of the time. And you're being in love with your journey. I think, as you described, skating across country pretty much, that there were certain things all along the way that kept getting bigger, and you kept enjoying things. You kept meeting people, and it just was snowballing into this big thing. And then when you're done, it adds so much to you because you were in love with the journey portion of it. Now you celebrate your next, celebrate the thing, and then really move on to the next thing. But just, that's such a great picture of, you had so much country to cover on skates, and being able to see all the beautiful things in all the different cities. Like, you really enjoyed your journey. And I think that's so important for people as they're going through, whether it's their treatment or recovery or everyday life. Really, we all have goals in mind. We all have things we want to accomplish. But if you just enjoy, like, presently where you are, it makes you so much more gracious, I think. And then gratitude is the total key to happiness for me. If you're so, feel so much gratitude on every little thing that you have and that you get to enjoy, even if you're going through a tough time. I think that's something that we all could probably do more of. And I love the way your story paints that picture. So after you check that box, I know you were brainstorming on what you were going to do next. Talk to us about a couple other things that you've done over the past 20 years or so to gain awareness for colorectal cancer.
Well, right before I left to go skate cross country, it's called Rolling to Recovery. I got an email from a young woman in Little Rock, Arkansas, who she said, "You don't know me. My name's Amanda, and I can't believe I found you. I was diagnosed with colon cancer when I was 24." And it was this immediate, oh my gosh, I just found a sister. And I remember writing back to her and, I was getting ready to leave on my skate. And I told her, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we found each other. Please stay in touch with me. And so we did. We emailed. Email was a little sparse for me when I was skating because we had dial-up internet then and we were living out of an RV. But, so I stayed in touch with her for, it was about a year and a half after, obviously through my skate and then afterward, and then probably another year and a half after that. And, I kind of, I skated, I ran the marathon, and then I kind of went back to my life. I was a disc jockey for a little while and kind of stepped back a little bit from colon cancer awareness. And then somewhere along the way, I got an email from Amanda's cousin saying, you don't know me. My name's Hannah, and I'm Amanda's cousin, and she hasn't told you this, but her doctors have given her 3 months to live. And more than anything, she wants to meet you. So could we fly you out here to Little Rock? And I didn't think twice. I was on a plane that weekend. And, I remember meeting Amanda for the first time, and she came down the hall and I could hear her, with her fun Southern accent. And she, I remember thinking to myself, gosh, she sounds okay. Like, is everybody sure she's sick? And she stepped into the light, and I remember thinking to myself, like, where did she go? I had seen pictures of this beautiful blonde girl who, she was a shell. And it just, my heart stopped when I saw her. So I spent the weekend with her, just hanging around on the couch and just spending time with her family. And on Saturday night, the two of us watched Saturday Night Live, and it was the only time we really spent alone together. And I remember her saying to me, Molly, I'm really jealous of all the things that you're doing to raise awareness of colon cancer. I wish I could do those with you. And I made a promise to her right there that I would continue to do it for both of us. The following week, we were featured on the Today Show with Katie Couric. I did the interview from the Today, from New York, and Amanda stayed in Little Rock and did it on her couch. And after the interview, Katie Couric asked if I would wait for her in the green room, and who's going to turn that down?
Right.
So I waited, and she came upstairs, and she was wonderful. She spent a good 30 minutes with us chatting, and called Amanda back home and sent she put together a gift package and everything for her. And as she's leaving, she's waving, she's on her way out the door, and she says, Molly, she turns back and looks at me. She says, if you think of anything crazy for Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, let us know and we'll have you back on the show. And, I'm like, oh, okay. The wheels start spinning. And so fast forward, and Amanda had actually nominated me to carry the Olympic torch when it came through my town. And I carried it on December 30th of 2001. And I remember that the news back home, they videoed it and they interviewed me and everything. And then they sent the footage back to Little Rock so Amanda could see it. And she died 2 days later. And her father called me, and I remember getting the call and being excited to hear from him. And then as soon as I realized, kind of clicked, wait a second, he's not called me before.
Yeah.
So he called to give me the news, and he said, Molly, I think she waited to see you carry the torch before she let go. She was ready to let go. So I was angry. I was sad. I was, I couldn't understand why Amanda with 2 young kids had died, but I survived. And then I thought about Katie Couric's challenge. And so I started thinking about ways that, what could we do to continue to raise awareness? Something we could do in Amanda's memory. And one morning in the shower, I was like, we're gonna build a big giant colon, and it's gonna travel around the country, and it's gonna be funny, and it's gonna be awesome, and it's gonna make people talk about colon cancer, which in turn is gonna get them to talk to their doctors and hopefully get them screened. So Amanda's cousin and I raised the money and built the Colossal Colon. The Cancer Research and Prevention Foundation and Roche Pharmaceutical both put a lot of money into it. And they said, we'll let you take this if you let us take it on, or we'll help you build this if you let us take it on a national tour next year. And we were like, okay. So not only did we get it built, but it was put on a 20-city national tour all over the United States. We started in, where did we start? We went DC, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, all over the country, Little Rock, all the way over to the West Coast. It was on Jimmy Kimmel when we were out in LA. It was, we crisscrossed back across the country, and the number of people that came through that exhibit was just staggering. And then in addition to that, it was all over the news. Every city we hit, it was everywhere. So we were I like to joke around. We like to put colons where they don't belong. It was everywhere. People were talking about colon cancer, but I specifically remember saying to Hannah, as we watched, I think it was in Washington, DC, on the little ticker at the bottom of the screen, Colossal Colon visits Washington, D.C. to educate about colorectal cancer. And I thought to myself, that's awesome. But now what? Because that's great. Lots of people just saw it go by on the ticker on the screen. But what else can we do? So we were actually on our 18th city, 19th city, Philadelphia. And I remember just being exhausted mentally, physically. And I said, listen, I'm leaving the tent. I'm going to go and I'm going to have lunch. Don't call me. Don't bug me. Nothing. Just let me decompress for a little bit. And I'm gone 5 minutes and I get a phone call. Molly, you have to come back to the exhibit. You have to be here. There's a woman who came from, 3-4 hours away just to meet you. She was diagnosed when she was 22. You've got to come back. So I went back to the tent and there's this beautiful girl named Erica waiting to meet me. And I remember stepping into the tent and seeing her and my jaw just dropped. And again, it's that, whoa, no way she had colon cancer. So we chatted with her for a little while about what we were doing. We were starting to form the Colon Club, this nonprofit organization to raise awareness of colon cancer in out-of-the-box ways, especially in young people. And Erica said, we should do a calendar. We can show our scars and tell our stories and it'll be awesome. And we were like, okay. So the following summer, we got 12 young female survivors together. We flew them up to my parents' house on Lake George in upstate New York. And we took pictures and we somehow managed to put together this really beautiful calendar. And it was kind of twofold. Part of it was, let's get these people together because, that photo shoot was in 2004. And, there's no cell phone. There's no, you know what I mean? There's no Facebook. None of that stuff existed yet. So these people hadn't met anyone like them yet. And I remember them getting there and seeing them all together and just thinking to myself, these guys are meeting their Amanda right now. And it was a really powerful moment for me. But then on the other side of it, they go back home and now we hand them a calendar that they can go and they can hand out in their hometowns and they can go to their news stations and they can raise awareness in their own hometown. So it was kind of this spider web of awareness happening. And then the following year, I think we were on our second or third Colondar, when I was asked to play a shift with every team in the United Hockey League, which is a men's professional ice hockey league. And, this is kind of the abbreviated version of it, but again, it was, let's put colons where they don't belong. Let's raise awareness of colon cancer, stick Molly on the ice, and a man will come and travel with Molly to every city. I had this walking enema going with me everywhere. All the teams from every city, all the teams wore the Blue Star on their jersey. We had the announcers in the arena and the radio announcers were, talking about colon cancer facts. ESPN did an interview. So, you again, putting colons where they don't belong. And so it's kind of been, one thing after another, everything kind of snowballed. And I just kept saying, yeah, let's do that one too. Let's do that one too. And yeah, that one too. And what's amazing is now here we are 20 years later and I've written this book, which is, it's even for me, I look back and I'm like, wow, did I really have a part in all of that? But to see now what's happened, here we are 20 years later, and I guess it was 10 years later, there was a gentleman back home who was the kid at the time reading the newspaper and seeing that once a week I was posting this column while I was skating cross country, and he decided he wanted to do something crazy to raise awareness. So he, at the 10-year anniversary of my skate cross country, he decided he was going to skate back. Not skate, but bike. So he biked back from Colorado to Glens Falls. And, he works for a medical device company. So they were a big sponsor and he raised a bunch of money. Then he did coast to coast. And, he talked about this ripple effect of how people are affected by it and then take that and go and do something else of their own. And I realized while I was skating cross country, it was actually the last day, some stranger signed in on my guest book online, and they said, Molly, one drop of rain ripples an entire pond. You'll never know the lives that you've touched. I can't say the word survivor yet. This hasn't been real, but you should know that you're not alone. There are many of us. And it was a really powerful moment for me to have then, but now to look back and see what's happened because of all the little things along the way. And how many people are affected now. The Colondar is now a magazine. So it's in its 15th year. It's called On the Rise, referring to the number of young people all diagnosed under the age of 50. This is its 15th year. And, it's kind of mind boggling to me to think about how far it's come. every year it kind of got a little bit better and a little bit better. And they've done a really, really great job at the Colon Club with teaching these survivors who come in to have their picture taken to now go and advocate. I think almost all of them are currently at Call on Congress right now, and they're learning how to go home and advocate in their hometowns. It's awesome to see.
Wow. So much.
There's a lot.
Yeah, geez. So let's talk about One Drop of Rain. I was going to ask you where the title of the book came from. So you kind of just told everyone it came from the inspiration of the person that signed into your guest book there. When you sat down to write this book, when you started thinking about back over all the things that we just talked about, you said you were kind of amazed that you were a part of everything. And, I think that's so funny to hear you say, because you've done so much. However, you didn't stop, like you didn't stop after each little thing. Like this is just a part of like who you are and part of your legacy, I would say. And the book really describes all these different things and all your whole scenario. And then just life in general, not necessarily all about cancer, but just life in general and the journey and everything that you go through. When you look back, as you were writing, when you started looking back, what really inspired you to sit down and say, hey, now is the perfect time to write this book? And what kind of goal do I want to accomplish?
I started writing when I was doing my chemo. So this has been a 20-year process. There was never like I sat down to write it, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. So I would say for anybody out there who is even thinking about it or even not, writing was very therapeutic for me. And I think a lot of people might find that. And I'm glad that I did, because it was a lot easier to take all of those notes and put them, turn them into a book. There have been, I was writing very heavily for the first few years. And then, I don't even remember what kind of took me off my path, but I kind of put it aside for a while. And then I came back to it. And then I had kids, and we all know what happens when you have kids, and everything goes all wampaskew. And so I stopped writing again for a while. And then I started up again, and then I put it down again. And just this past year, I actually, I think I told you I'm a personal trainer, and I have a client elderly client who, she and I would always exchange books. And I gave it to her just to read. And she ended up moving recently down to South Carolina, but I was dropping her off at the airport, and she said to me, like, you need to finish that book. You need to, whatever it is, you need to do it. You need to get your butt in gear and do it. And shortly after that, I went to the photo shoot for the Colondar, or the On the Rise magazine, and they told me there that it was the 15th year. And I was like, how did I not realize that it's been 15 years? And so they asked, could they do, could they do a shoot with me, and could we do kind of a follow-up story about where you are now? And I thought, this is it. I'm coming up on my 20-year anniversary, colon cancerversary, if you will. And, every year, and I don't know how other survivors feel, but I would always plan like this big party for my cancerversary. And then as it got closer, I would kind of go, maybe I don't want to do that. And every single year, without fail, I was sad at some point during the day. I got anxious around the date. And this is the first year I decided I was going to do it, and I pulled the trigger on it. And this is the first year, 20 years later, that I had no anxiety. I wasn't sad. I wasn't, so I felt like it was almost a gift to myself this year to get this story finished. So, and I hope people read it. I think it's more than just colon cancer. I think there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. What do you want? Let's say, what would be maybe 3 takeaways that you want the reader to get from your book?
Well, part of it is my promise to Amanda. There definitely is some awareness about colon cancer in there. And I'm still keeping this promise to her. Another would be, I think that the journey is what you make of it. Mm-hmm. In that, and maybe my journey would have been different if I had stage 4 colon cancer and was told I'm not going to make it. There's no doubt that might have been different for me. But I will say, how a person responds to the situation they're in is 99% of, trying to find the right words for it, 99% of the outcome, I guess. If you come into it firmly believing that this is going to be a horrible day, of course you're going to have a bad day. But if you come into it thinking the day is going to be great and maybe a couple things go wrong and maybe something goes severely wrong, if you keep a good attitude, it'll definitely help. So I firmly believe in kind of keeping a positive attitude. And the third thing would be that one person can make a difference. It took me 20 years to be able to look back and realize, because there was never a time where I was like, oh, I want to get awards or I want to do, it was never about that. The award to me was being able to hear a story or two of people who maybe my story saved. I know we moved into our house here probably, 14 years ago, and the neighbor came over and introduced himself and he said, we've met before. You had your big colon at the mall here and you told me I needed a colonoscopy and he had polyps removed. There was also, I've played a couple of times in the Empire State Games, which is like the New York State Amateur Olympics. And I think I was on like my fourth or fifth time playing. And I actually was after let me fast forward. I just had my second baby and one of my coaches called me and he said, Molly, tryouts, you coming? And I was like, I had a baby 11 days ago. I'm not going to be there. But he said, well, that was the first reason I was calling. The second is because I've been driving around with your hockey card in my car. And the hockey card is this, instead of doing a brochure for the UHL Crosschecks Colon Cancer Project that we did, we made a hockey card, which it was one of my Colondar photos. So it's me in a bikini. I joke around that I was taking one for the team on that. But so he had this, what I call the dirty hockey card in his car. But it had my colon cancer statistics on it. So it had, my age at diagnosis, my stage, my hometown. And then on the back, it had the symptoms and the risk factors for colon cancer. So he's driving around with this in his car for however many months, probably more like years. And he had blood in his stool. So he went to his doctor and he told his doctor, I have blood in my stool. And the doctor said, you're too young. Don't worry about it. And he said, well, I had this player and she was diagnosed when she was 23. I think I might need a colonoscopy. And he got one and he had something like 24 polyps removed.
Wow.
Those are stories that I'm lucky enough that I get to hear, because a lot of people will be doing this advocacy and they won't ever hear those stories, but they're happening. I promise you. They're happening. So the more people that share their stories, the more lives that we're all going to save, or at least, colon cancer being one of the most treatable forms of cancer, the sooner we can get people to talk about it and do something about it, the better.
So I want to go back to your 3 reasons why people should read your book.
Sorry, did I jump ahead there?
No, it's totally fine. The first thing you said was you were keeping your promise to Amanda.
Yeah.
If Amanda were still here today and she could see all of the work that you've done, what do you think she would say to you?
Well, I'm pretty sure that if Amanda were still here, we would be doing this together, which would be pretty awesome. I think she would be proud to be a part of it, but kind of in the same manner, I think she would think, okay, what's next? Because you said it a few minutes ago, like it's kind of in my blood now. And I don't know why. I don't know why it became my thing. There have been times where Amanda, I felt like, was very much like me in that she would just say what she's thinking, whether it's maybe it's not the right thing to say at the time, but and maybe that's why I've been successful. And I think she would have been too, because we say the things people are thinking but don't want to say. And I think that she would have been very, very proud to be a part of this, and proud of the things that we've been able to accomplish.
The second thing you said, you talked about mindset, as far as being in the right mindset. I totally subscribe to that. Our mindset is definitely our choice. I think if you get cancer, lots of times it's not a choice that you get to make. No one would take that option if they were presented with it. But, when bad things happen or when we go through tough moments in life, we have a choice. We always can choose our attitude, I would say.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've chosen to have such a positive attitude. And I know along the way, as you meet people, if you're like me, and I'm pretty sure you are with this, the more people we meet, we tend to take on, their emotions as well too. As you meet someone and you see they're struggling and you see the pain that they have, if you're really passionate about doing this, you'll take on that. And that's a burden sometimes, in a good way, I would say. It's a burden
Right.
because you're bearing each other's burdens, which is what we're all called to do anyways. But you do that, and it can take a toll on you emotionally a little bit because you get so involved in that person. And I know just by talking to you, you want to see everyone win. You want to see everyone beat this, but unfortunately that's not always the case for some people.
Right.
But your mindset, what you said about that, I think is so true. So I'm just encouraging people right now, if you're listening, if you're, we all have to remind ourselves to get back on track mentally, because it's really easy to go down that rabbit hole of crazy emotions and things you fantasize about that haven't even happened yet. And you're sad and depressed and anxious and everything before you even know it. But to really get back on track with your mindset. And the last thing you said was about one person can change everything, which I totally believe that. So you brought this up several times about whether it was your neighbor or whether it's people you met along the way. Like, you've been that one person that's changed everything for a lot of people. How do you feel having that responsibility, and how do you feel about your life so far being that person that's changed a lot, whether it's awareness or whatever you've done? Like, how do you feel about being that one person for so many people?
Geez, that's a deep one. I don't know. I think you just used the word pressure. Like, do I feel pressure or something like that? I don't know that I've ever looked at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about how Amanda and I were kind of similar in that I felt like we would both say what was on our mind, whether it was the right thing or the politically correct thing to say or not. And I think, I don't know. I never thought of it in a way that was anything other than I feel like I'm good at this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not other than I guess I get through to people, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know why that is. But I feel lucky to be able to be good at this.
Mm-hmm.
I joke around. I love talking about colons. Well, yeah, because it's funny. You know what I mean? You can make a subject that people find gross. You can make it funny. And I like to make people laugh. I like to make people feel good, and I like to help people. And I think that all, because of that, and because I know that this is something that I'm pretty decent at, I've never felt pressure or like
Mm-hmm.
do you know what I mean? It's just like we've talked about, it's just kind of part of me. And I also keep coming back to it. So kind of like the book, I put it down for a couple of years, and then something kind of pushed me to get back into it. And then I put it down again. And it's kind of the same thing with raising awareness. When the right thing comes along, I jump in the boat and I go and I say, yeah, let's do this because this will help people. And if I don't feel like it's the right moment, I won't. I've never pushed myself to do something that I didn't feel was the right thing. And maybe that's why I'm not ever stressed about raising something I keep telling people is it's your story. You can't get it wrong. You're telling your story. There's no right or, nobody can tell you, oh no, that's not correct. And when you share your story, you will connect with people. And that, bringing those connections, that's what's raising awareness, is those connections and those personal stories. And, I'm watching Facebook, and I'm watching all the, Instagram posts and everything now. And I'm seeing it's not just one person standing in a room screaming anymore. There are thousands and thousands of people doing it now. And it's really incredible to see.
What advice would you give a young adult right now that's listening who is going through their journey with cancer? We have a lot of people with every type of cancer listens to the show, and a lot of caregivers as well too. What would you say to someone right now who maybe is a young adult and they're in a difficult part of the whole cancer life cycle, depending on what part of their journey that they're in? What would you say to that person right now as maybe some words of advice to help them keep fighting and keep pushing forward?
Well, I'm old now, so it's hard to, no, but when I look back, I think, everybody's different. So not everybody would have reacted the same way I did when somebody was like, oh, that sucks that you got colon cancer. But, for me, those were the right words at the right time. For somebody else, take a breath, take a step back, do some journaling, and educate yourself about the options that you have. I know that other survivors have told me along the way, things were pretty cut and dry with me. It was, here's what you're going to do. Here's what we recommend. Second opinion, it was the same thing. Boom, boom. That's what we did. I've had some survivors tell me that, their type of ostomy surgery, for example, or, that was their one way to be able to make their own choices. So I think educating yourself, not too much, but educating yourself so that you know what you're going into. And I'd say, don't let it define you. Find what you're passionate about. If you, for me, telling my story, every single time I told someone I have colon cancer, here's what you need to look for. This is, every time I told someone that, it was like a little bit more of a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Maybe that's not what will help another young survivor, but something will, whatever it is you're passionate about, find that one thing and go with it. Go with it. Do what's right, not what feels forced, but go with it. And try to keep a good attitude. I know that's harder, easier said than done, because a lot of people don't have the same outcome I did. And like I said, I may have had a different, if my outcome were looking a little bit different, maybe I would have responded differently. I'm not sure. But I would also say, find somebody that is also young, not to sing Kumbaya with, not to just, with Amanda, meeting her was the best thing that ever happened to me as far as my colon cancer. And we didn't talk about colon cancer. We did a little bit, but we talked about boys. We talked about her kids. We talked about, wearing bikinis on the beach and scaring children with our scars. We talked about what 20-year-old girls talk about. We didn't talk about colon cancer. It's more about being in the same room with that person and knowing kind of what they've been through.
Mm-hmm. And I love all that. I feel like storytelling is part of the healing process. And sometimes it takes certain people a little longer to get to that point where they're comfortable to tell their story. But once you start telling your story, each time a little bit of that weight is lifted off of you. And, just like yourself, I enjoy telling other people's stories as well, because your experience could be completely different than mine or someone else's. And they could really resonate with you and what you've done. I want to take a second to acknowledge you for a lot of the things that you've done. I know you can't live life in the rearview mirror looking to see what all you've done. You just kind of got to keep going. But being obedient to your calling is one thing. It's so, I like to talk about it as being, your calling versus your obligation. Any kind of obligation you have can get mundane. You can push it to the side. But your calling, you never run out of energy for your calling. And you are doing your calling every day. You're obedient to follow your calling is one thing. And you haven't ran out of energy. I mean, you literally skated across the US. So, and then all the other advocacy that you've done, from the Colondar to the ice hockey to now your book that just came out. Your calling is something that you're living your life every single day and doing. And that requires a level of obedience, I think, in our part to really follow that and to really get to the point where we know what our calling is. And, again, going back to one person changing your life, Amanda, like meeting her, it's like, now I know, in a way. And then look where you are so many years later. So I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for following your calling, for being obedient, for doing all the work that you've done over the past 20 years now. Just the amount of lives and stuff that you've impacted are far greater than you could probably ever imagine. And I know you're not done yet. And I know as this book continues to do well for you, you're going to reach, even more people, by your story. And I absolutely love that. So on behalf of everybody that you've ever had impacted, I want to tell you, thank you for all of the people. I know I've known you for a short amount of time, and just hearing your story, I've got a page full of notes over here and like one-liners that you said that you've really impacted me from. And
thank you.
The fact that I get to share, your story with so many people is really important to me. And it just does nothing but magnifies people. You don't see somebody on the top of the mountain and without, knowing that they've had people to help them get up there. So you've had people along the way pushing you, and your story is going to do that for so many other people. So
thank you.
If our listeners want to connect with you, what are a couple of different ways that they can reach out to you, and where can they find your book if they want to purchase that?
Well, the book's available on Amazon. If you just look up One Drop of Rain, it should come right up. It's $14.99 in paperback, and it's $9.99 for the ebook. And a small portion of it will go to, every book sold is going to go to the Colon Club to help further the mission of raising awareness in out-of-the-box ways, especially in young people. And if people want to connect with me, I'm on Twitter. It's puck_chick13. And on Instagram, it's Molly McMaster Morgoslepov. So if you can spell it, you can find me.
Well, I will save everyone the trouble and put links to all this in the show notes here and in all the social media posts we put about.
Thank you so much for having me. This is, this is another way to continue to raise awareness, and it's just so many ripples everywhere now. Yeah,
I love it. Well, thank you again for taking time. For being so transparent and authentic and honest about your story and all the things that you've done. I cannot wait to pick up a copy of your book and check it all the way out. I've seen portions of it, I would say. I've read little snippets of it myself, but I can't wait to get the whole thing read so I can talk about it even more with all the people out there. So, Molly, thank you again for taking time today to speak to all of our listeners. And again, we appreciate everything that you've done, and we'll continue to follow up with you and share your journey as you continue to push more advocacy and awareness for everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do, because again, that, all of what you do is also, it's kind of awesome to see other people with a mission too and following their mission.
Thank you.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.